Well, gentlemen, I actually had to get a lasso and throw it and corral both of you because you both had some big news and late breaking yesterday, and we can go into that, Scott, to get you here on the floor for a limited amount of time. So first of all, thanks for the generosity of making the time.
Our pleasure. Good to be with you, Joe.
So share with our audience. They'll read it online and in the news, but some substantial late breaking yesterday in two items.
Yeah, we had two really kind of landmark studies. The EU de novo trial, over 3,300 patients, and the US ISR trial, and really probably nobody better to talk about it than George here.
Yeah. So George, what did it look like?
So it was great. So let me start by saying the implications of these two trials, it's been long coming, right? We've had these questions for over 10 years, and now we have some answers to some questions that we haven't had previously. And let me just remind you, historically, we have really had no change in the paradigm of treatment for about 25 years, since 2000 when drug-eluting stents came out. But these two trials literally were randomized controlled trials. As Scott alluded to earlier, in the de novo trial, over 3,300 patients, randomizing standard of care, drug-eluting stents to coronary de novo lesions, to a drug-eluting balloon strategy. And the second trial was an in-stent restenosis trial, over 400 patients, randomizing standard of care, 80% drug-eluting stents, 20% plain old balloon angioplasty versus the Selution drug-eluting balloon. In both instances, they were non-inferiority trials, both met non-inferiority, indicating that we now have a strategy with Selution drug-eluting balloons to treat both de novo as well as in-stent restenosis in collaboration with drug-eluting stents. So for physicians especially, having the opportunity to leave no metal behind is very important, because we understand that over time, it's not just at a one-year endpoint, but over the time of the patient, if we can get away with a leave nothing behind strategy, we believe that patients will do better over time, just because of the complications that can occur with leaving a metallic scaffold. In terms of restenosis, we all know that when you already have a metallic scaffold in place, that number one is if you have to lay another metallic scaffold, it takes options away in terms of what you can do for the patient. And a lot of times, two layers of stents do worse over time. So now it gives us another opportunity to treat the patient, leave options open, and it's both safe and efficacious. From a patient standpoint, I think it's a big win, right? Because all of us and a lot of patients don't want any foreign bodies left in their body, foreign substances left in their body, and this gives us that opportunity.
Wow. So that rippled through here, especially to the stent manufacturers for sure. And that category, it's interesting. I go way back with Cordis back when my office was down at Coral Gables, and we built the drug-coated stent business.
Yeah.
And now to have the Med Alliance and the Cordis collaboration put itself in the rearview mirror, but now open the door for where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't really go after and innovate, no matter what that means to your base business, then you're in trouble because somebody else is going to do it. So we have an opportunity here to really advance patient care, like George said. The big win here is for the patient, and I think for our customers, that's going to accrue to Cordis, obviously, as well. But we're so excited in terms of what this means for patient care.
And this also validates, in part, the strategy that Cordis has taken on in the buy to build and the accretive addition to technologies that then allow us to take that out to the market.
Yeah, we really saw three legs to our innovation stool. First, we've got an incredible R&D team, so we've focused them, we've funded them. The second is Cordis X, this incredible ecosystem that Duke Roline and his team have built, and we really allocated capital across the 5 steps of an interventional procedure to identify where the unmet or undermet needs are and deployed capital and innovations going toward that. And the third leg of the stool is M&A, and we're just so thrilled to have this Med Alliance team as now part of Cordis and the opportunity that we have in front of us.
George, as CMO, there's nothing more powerful than clinical data. especially in a randomized trial.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's got to be rewarding for you to be one of the architects of that and then watch that outcome provide substantial evidence to your peers in the executive suite.
Yeah, and there's no question about that. First, let me just remark on what you said. So clinical trial data lead how we think. They answer questions to help us improve practice. What's interesting about these trials is it was designed to give us a real world population, right? Rather than a lot of randomized controlled trials that are very narrow in the patient selection. So we get a signal or we get an answer for a certain patient population. With the de novo trial, large vessels, small vessels, calcified vessels, genders, demographics were included, right? It was a strategy trial. The in-stent restenosis, we included both drug-eluting stents and plain old balloon angioplasty to mimic what actually happens in real-world practice. So these trials especially are going to help us not only change guidelines, which will ultimately help us change how we treat patients.
And that's really important that you bring up. Look, clinical trials are important. They're validating their safety, efficacy, et cetera. But if you look at them, they can be bent by selection in the trial. And you can get a very limited data set that you want to be limited to justify what fits your product portfolio. Cordis seemed to have taken let's just let the evidence fall where it may, and let's make it an N of 10 instead of an N in 1 or 2, and we now have data that will benefit the entire category.
Yeah, what's really interesting, we heard Christian say it yesterday, the PI for the de novo trial, he went way back in time to when the trial was designed. And he talked about how unique it was that Jeff Jump and the Med-Alliance team let the investigators completely do what they wanted to do. So it was this incredibly bold and courageous and really curious trial in terms, to your point, George, real world practice. And what we got out of it is just extraordinary. And the amount of data that we're going to continue to mine over the next several years is just profound.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've seen other organizations that have then led to dominate a market where they made clinical trial data the absolute touchstone of truth. Abiomed comes to mind when I think
Right.
about that. Minogue did a phenomenal job of using clinical data, clinical trials to disprove what people thought was going to happen. If you think about an Impella device and
Yep.
what they asked you to do with it, like put it in and just sit and wait 40 minutes, right? That was unheard of before, but clinical data showed that that was the way to go. And then you're doing the same right now because we were throwing a stent anywhere we could for a long time.
And that's all we had.
Right.
Right now you've given us another therapy that shows that it is just as good as a drug-eluting stent. And let me remind you, you had mentioned this conflict with drug-eluting stents. It's not, it's collaborative, right? It's not to say you're taking drug-eluting stents off the shelf and that there aren't lesions that you're going to use a drug-eluting stent, but why not use a drug-eluting balloon first? And if you need a drug-eluting stent, then absolutely.
And you can always go to it, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
But your first line is a drug-eluting balloon.
If you can leave no metal behind,
Right.
why wouldn't you?
Is that the new byline for Cordis? Leave no metal behind?
Well, more importantly, I think it's what our customers are after.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it, and again, I would defer to George here, but I don't think about it as leave no metal behind per se, but leave a lot less metal behind. And what we see in clinical practice through the study is after customers got used to using Selution, their stent rate went down over time. And so the rate is interesting, and also the length of stents that are implanted is also interesting, and we're going to continue, as I said a moment ago, to mine that data.
And it'll be interesting to see how that carries over to other therapies in the human body.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that, right? That's the other thing. You talked about the boldness of these two studies. The portfolio of trials that have recently come out, not only in the cardiovascular space, but in the peripheral vascular space, there's very few treatment strategies that hold true across the whole vascular bed. And we're seeing that with the Selution drug-eluting balloon.
Well, gents, congratulations, and thank you on behalf of the industry, because I think it becomes an unlock for both the providers as well as the patients in the category.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks
very
for
much.
taking the time.
Thank you.
Perfect.
I'm Joe Mullings from the floor of TCT 2025, San Francisco. Be well.